The house was still and quiet, but Chioma's sleep never lasted long. She was only 9 years old, yet her nights ended before most people even stirred. "Chioma, are you deaf? Wake up and get to the stream before the cock crows." The sharp voice of Esther, her madam, cut through the darkness like a whip. Chioma flinched on her small mat by the kitchen door. Her heart pounded, and for a moment she wished it was all a dream. But it wasn't. She quickly sat up, rubbing her sleepy eyes. The cold floor had left marks on her thin arms where she had curled up for warmth. The mat she slept on was worn out, with patches torn at the edges. Beside her lay an old wrapper, her only covering at night. She could hear laughter from the children's room earlier in the evening when they had gone to bed. Esther's 2 children, cuddled under soft blankets, safe and warm. She envied them but never said a word. Dragging herself to her feet, she picked up the big yellow bucket waiting by the door. It was taller than her waist and looked too heavy for her small frame, but this was her duty. She pushed the wooden door open and stepped outside. The compound was dark, the moon fading as stars dotted the sky. Her breath came out in white puffs as she walked across the cold earth. A rooster crowed in the distance. It was 4 a.m. Chioma walked barefoot down the narrow path toward the stream. The stones bit into her feet, and the early morning breeze made her shiver. She hugged her thin wrapper around her shoulders until she reached the stream. The path was quiet but frightening. The tall trees bent low, their branches moving in the wind. Every rustle of leaves made her quicken her steps. She whispered the same short prayer she always said in moments like this. "God, please don't let me meet any spirits here. Please keep me safe." At the stream, she bent low. The water was cold against her fingers as she filled the bucket slowly to the brim. She could see her reflection in the ripples, a thin face, hair unkempt, eyes heavy with tiredness. Balancing the bucket on her small head, she straightened up. The weight made her neck ache instantly, but she steadied herself and began the long walk back. The path uphill was harder. Her knees wobbled, her arms shook, but she kept moving one careful step after another. By the time she reached home, her back was damp with sweat. Esther was already waiting at the door, arms folded, her face stern. "What took you so long?" Chioma lowered the bucket quickly and bowed her head. "Sorry, Ma. Sorry won't wash my clothes." Esther snapped. "Go and start scrubbing now. And make sure those plates are clean before sunrise." Chioma didn't reply. She quietly set the bucket aside and carried the basin to the washing area. One by one, she picked up Esther's clothes. Her small hands dipped them into the water, rubbed soap hard against the fabric, then scrubbed against the rough stone. Her knuckles turned red, her nails weak, but she kept going. After washing, she carried the plates from the kitchen. They were oily from last night's meal. She scrubbed until her hands smelled of detergent. When she finished, she thought maybe she could rest a little, but Esther's voice came again. "Here. Eat this before you faint and drop dead in my house." Esther shoved a plate of cold yam and beans at her. It was leftover food, hardened from the night. Chioma sat by the kitchen door and ate quickly. The food was tasteless, but she didn't complain. Hunger was worse. Soon, the children woke up. Esther called her sharply. "Chioma, come and bathe them. Don't waste time." She filled the tub with water, gently bathed the children, and tried to make them laugh as she poured water over their heads. They splashed and giggled, enjoying her gentle touch. "Your hands are too rough," the little boy teased. "You scrub like a stone." Chioma smiled faintly, though her hands were trembling from all the washing. She dressed them in neat uniforms, tied their shoelaces, and packed their bags. Esther stepped out, holding her wrapper tight. She looked at Chioma with disdain. "Make sure they look presentable. I don't want anyone thinking I can't take care of my children." "Yes, Ma," Chioma whispered. When everything was ready, she carried the children's bags and led them out the gate. Her small hands held theirs firmly as they walked to school. Other mothers passed by, holding their children's hands, too. They wore neat wrappers and headscarves, some with baskets on their heads. A few looked at Chioma with pity, others with indifference. She kept her eyes low and walked faster. After dropping Esther's children at their school, she turned quickly toward her own. Her heart beat fast as she walked, afraid she would be late again. The sun was rising now, and other children were running ahead, their laughter ringing in the morning air. Some had mothers waving after them. Chioma walked alone. Her stomach growled. She thought of the little girls in her class who carried lunchboxes filled with rice, beans, or bread and egg. She knew her own box would be empty, as always. She whispered softly to herself as she walked. One day, I will eat good food. One day, I will not wake up this early. The road stretched ahead, dusty and long, but in her heart she carried a small flame of hope. Her day had only just begun. By the time Chioma reached her school, the assembly bell had already rung. Children stood in neat lines, singing the national anthem as the headmaster watched from the stage. Chioma ran through the gate, breathless. Her uniform was faded, the hem torn in places, and her sandals were held together with thin strings. She tried to sneak into her line, but the teacher on duty spotted her. You again, the teacher barked. Late. Every day you are late. Stretch out your hands. Chioma obeyed silently. The teacher brought out a thin cane and struck her palms. 1, 2, 3 times. The pain shot through her fingers, but she bit her lip and refused to cry. Go and join your line, the teacher said sternly. And if you come late again tomorrow, you will cut grass until your back breaks. Yes, sir, Chioma whispered. She joined her classmates, her hands burning. Some children glanced at her and giggled. A boy behind her whispered, She's always late because she's a house girl. Another girl wrinkled her nose and said loudly, Look at her uniform, maybe she picked it from the dustbin. The children around laughed. Chioma's ears grew hot, but she stayed quiet. She knew if she replied, they would only mock her more. When assembly ended, the children marched into their classrooms. Chioma sat at the back, trying to focus on the chalkboard. The teacher began writing sums, but her mind wandered. She remembered she had to leave at break time to fetch Esther's children. Her chest grew tight. She wanted to learn, to be like the other children who raised their hands eagerly, but duty always dragged her away. As the morning dragged on, her stomach growled. Other pupils brought out snacks wrapped in paper, buns, akara, or roasted corn. She had nothing. She pretended to look into her bag as though searching for something, but there was only an old exercise book and a stub of pencil. Finally, the bell for break rang. The children rushed out happily, their laughter filling the air. Chioma slipped quietly through the back door and began walking quickly to the other school. By the time she reached the children's school, the sun was hot, and her legs were already tired. She held their hands and guided them back home, even carrying the younger one when he complained of being tired. By the time she dropped them off and ran back to her own school, the bell had rung again. The teacher stood at the door with arms crossed. Chioma, he said sharply. Late from break again. Do you think this school is your father's house? She lowered her head. Sorry, sir. Sorry. Go and kneel at the corner. She obeyed, her knees pressing into the rough cement floor. The children laughed again. One girl whispered, maybe she went to wash plates for her madam during break. Another boy said, she is not a real student. She's just wasting space. The laughter cut through her heart, but she kept her eyes on the ground. After some time, the teacher allowed her back into class. She sat down, her knees aching, and tried to copy notes from the chalkboard. The words blurred before her eyes. She blinked hard, but tears rolled down her cheeks, falling onto her paper. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked why. That evening, as she packed her books, a girl approached her. Chioma, why are you always late? Why don't you bring food to school? My mother says you are a maid in Esther's house. Chioma looked away, embarrassed. I don't know. The girl shrugged. Well, my mother said it's not good for a child to suffer like that. But maybe that's your destiny. Chioma said nothing. She hugged her old books to her chest and walked home slowly. On the way, she whispered softly, almost like a secret promise to herself. One day, I will wear a neat uniform. One day, I will not be punished for things I cannot control. One day. Her words hung in the evening air as she disappeared down the dusty road. The morning began like every other, but Chioma's body was weak. She had hardly slept, tossing on her thin mat as mosquitoes buzzed around her ears. When Esther's sharp voice cut through the darkness. Chioma, go to the stream now before I pour water on your head. She could barely lift herself. Her head spun, her stomach cramped with hunger, but she obeyed. She picked up the yellow bucket and dragged her feet toward the stream. The ground seemed to sway beneath her. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time she reached the water, her arms trembled. She bent down, filled the bucket halfway, and tried to lift it. But her strength gave out. The bucket slipped, splashing water over her bare legs. Ah! She gasped, clutching her chest. She tried again, managing this time to hoist the bucket onto her head. The weight pressed down like a stone, and her knees wobbled. Halfway home, her vision blurred. The trees around her spun in circles. She staggered, the bucket slipping, water spilling over her shoulders. She stumbled again and fell, the bucket rolling into the dust. Her body hit the ground. Everything went dark. When she opened her eyes, strange faces were around her. Two women carrying firewood had found her lying unconscious by the path. "Ihia, this child is suffering," one woman said, fanning her with a piece of cloth. "Look how thin she is," the other added. "Where are her parents?" "She lives with Esther," the first woman answered. "Everyone knows the way that woman treats her." They helped her to her feet and carried the bucket back for her. Together they led her to Esther's house. But instead of gratitude, Esther's face twisted with anger. "Useless girl," she shouted. "So you fainted on the road and embarrassed me before people? Are you the only maid in this town?" The women tried to speak. "Madam, the girl is not well. She needs rest." Esther waved them off. "Thank you, but leave her. She is only pretending. If I let her rest, who will wash the plates? Who will clean the house?" The women exchanged sad glances, but they left quietly. Chioma stood trembling, her head bowed. Esther pointed at the pile of dirty plates. "Go and wash them now. And don't let me hear any more excuses." "Yes, Ma," Chioma whispered, her voice cracking. She staggered to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she picked up a plate. Her eyes stung, but she blinked quickly. She didn't want Esther to see her tears. That night, after everyone had eaten and gone to bed, she crept back to her mat. Her stomach was empty. She had only managed to lick the leftovers from the children's plates. She curled up tightly, holding her knees to her chest. Finally, the tears came, rolling down her cheeks silently. She pressed her hand over her mouth so no one would hear her sobs. "Why me, Lord?" she whispered. "What did I do wrong? Why do I suffer like this?" No voice answered, only the chirping of crickets in the night. But deep inside, a quiet flame of hope still refused to die. The sun was blazing that afternoon as Chioma walked back from the river, her small frame bent under the heavy bucket of water. Dust clung to her legs, her hair was rough, and her old dress was patched in several places. She tried to hurry, knowing Esther would scold her if she delayed. But just as she turned into the street, she heard a familiar voice. "Chioma, is that you?" She froze, almost dropping the bucket. Slowly, she turned. Standing by the roadside was a girl about her age, neatly dressed in a bright school uniform, her hair well-plaited, her shoes polished. It was Ada, her childhood friend from the village. Chioma's eyes widened. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Ada ran closer, staring at her in shock. "Chioma, What happened to you? Why do you look like this? Chioma's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to tell her everything, but shame held her back. She simply lowered her eyes. Ada shook her head. No, this is not the girl I knew. You used to smile. You used to play with us. She reached out and touched Chioma's thin arm gently. Who is treating you this way? Before Chioma could answer, Esther's sharp voice rang out from the compound. Chioma, where are you? Must I shout your name 100 times? Chioma flinched, clutching her bucket tighter. I have to go. But Ada wouldn't let her slip away. She rushed home and told her mother everything she had seen. That evening, Ada's mother, Mom Nkechi, knocked on Esther's door. Esther opened it, frowning. Yes. What do you want? I want to speak with you, Mom Nkechi said firmly. Her eyes fell on Chioma, who was crouched by the corner, scrubbing plates with trembling hands. Esther crossed her arms. About what? About this child, Mom Nkechi replied. She is suffering too much in your hands. She is only 9 years old. Look at her. Thin, tired, no proper clothes. Do you think God is blind? Esther scoffed. She is not my responsibility. Her parents sent her here, and I feed her. Is that not enough? Feed her. Mom Nkechi's voice rose. With scraps. With punishment. This girl is not an animal. She deserves care, love and schooling, just like your own children. Esther's eyes flashed with anger. Mind your business, woman. This is my house. I do what I like here. But Mom Nkechi stepped forward boldly. Then hear me well. From today, I will not watch this child suffer. I am taking her with me. Chioma's eyes widened in shock. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. Take her. Out of this house? Away from Esther? Esther gasped. You cannot. She is mine. She is not yours, Mom Nkechi snapped. She belongs to God, and I will not let you destroy her. The tension was heavy, but finally, Esther looked away. Perhaps she was embarrassed before the neighbors who had gathered to watch. Perhaps she was tired of the trouble. With a dismissive wave, she muttered, Fine. Take her, then. She is more burden than help. Mom Nkechi turned to Chioma and extended her hand. Come, my child. Chioma's hands trembled as she dropped the plate she was washing. Slowly, she rose and walked forward, her eyes filled with tears. She looked back once, half expecting Esther to call her back. But Esther had already turned away. That night, for the first time in years, Chioma lay on a soft bed. A blanket covered her tiny body, and a gentle breeze came through the window. She stared at the ceiling, hardly believing it was real. Ada sat beside her, smiling. From now on, you are safe. My mother said you will live with us. Tomorrow, we go to Lagos together. Tears rolled down Chioma's cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. She whispered softly, Thank you, God, thank you. For the first time in a long while, she closed her eyes and slept peacefully. The journey to Lagos felt like a dream. Chioma had never traveled so far before. She sat quietly beside Ada and Mom Nkechi in the noisy bus, clutching her small nylon bag that held all she owned, a faded dress, a torn exercise book, and a pair of old sandals. The road stretched endlessly. She watched through the window as villages, farmlands, and markets passed by. The smell of roasted corn and fried plantain from roadside sellers drifted into the bus. She had never imagined such long roads or so many cars. Ada leaned close and whispered, When we reach Lagos, you'll see. It's busy, but you'll love it. Chioma nodded, though her heart pounded. What if she did not fit in? What if this new life was just another disappointment? By evening, they arrived at Ada's home, a small but neat flat painted cream, with potted flowers at the doorway. Mom Nkechi guided her inside. This is your home now, my child. Chioma froze at the sight of a bed in the corner of the small room prepared for her. A proper bed, with sheets, a pillow, and a blanket. She touched it carefully, as though it might disappear. That night, after a warm bath and a hot meal of rice and stew, she lay on the bed. The softness cradled her body. She wrapped the blanket around herself, tears slipping down her cheeks. So this is what comfort feels like, she thought. For the first time, she did not wake at 4 a.m. The next morning, Mom and Kechi handed her a new uniform, neatly ironed and polished black shoes. Put these on. Today you start school here. Chioma held the clothes, unable to speak. New clothes. For her? She slipped them on, staring at herself in the mirror. She almost didn't recognize the girl looking back. At school in Lagos, she was shy. The other children looked at her curiously. She sat quietly at the back, unsure if she belonged. But when the teacher asked a question, something stirred in her. She raised her hand timidly and gave the correct answer. The teacher smiled warmly. Well done. Very good. The class turned to look at her. For once, no one laughed. Day by day, Chioma adjusted. She studied hard, copying notes carefully. Ada sat with her after school, helping her with sums and reading. Mom and Kechi encouraged her with gentle words. You are not less than any child, Chioma. You are special. Never forget that. Slowly, her confidence grew. One afternoon, during break, a group of girls invited her to share their snacks. At first, she shook her head, embarrassed. But they insisted, and she tasted meat pie for the first time. The buttery crust melted in her mouth, and her eyes widened. She smiled shyly, and the girls laughed kindly. Little by little, the scars inside her began to heal. She still remembered Esther's harsh words, the punishments, and the hunger. But now she knew there was another kind of life, one filled with kindness, learning, and hope. Each night, before she slept, she whispered a prayer. Thank you, God, for this new beginning. Please help me make something of it. She didn't know it yet, but this beginning was only the first step on a path that would lead her to greatness. Lagos became a turning point in Chioma's life. Every morning she woke up in her own bed, not to fetch water in the dark, but to prepare for school like every other child. The smell of hot breakfast filled the air, and Mom and Kechi always made sure she ate before leaving the house. At first, the new school felt overwhelming. The classrooms were bigger, the teachers stricter, and the children spoke with confidence. Chioma often sat quietly, afraid to draw attention. But the words of Mom and Kechi echoed in her ears. You are not less than any child. You are special. So she tried. She stayed up late, reading her books by lantern light. She asked questions when she didn't understand. Slowly, her teachers began to notice her. One day, during a math lesson, the teacher wrote a difficult sum on the board. The class went silent. No one raised their hand. Chioma hesitated, then slowly lifted hers. Yes, Chioma, the teacher called. She stood, her heart racing, and explained the answer step by step. When she finished, the teacher beamed. Excellent. That's correct. Class, clap for her. The room filled with applause. Chioma's cheeks grew hot, but inside she felt something new, pride. From then on, she blossomed. She answered questions, joined in debates, and even helped her classmates after school. Her name began to appear on the notice board for top students. At the end of the year, she received a prize for Best in Science. Standing on the stage with her certificate, she thought of the days she carried buckets before dawn, of Esther's harsh voice, of the punishments in her old school. Tears stung her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. I want to be a doctor, she whispered to Ada that day. I want to heal people. I want to help children like me. Ada grinned. And you will. I know you will. Years passed. Chioma faced challenges, late nights studying, tough exams, moments of doubt. But each time, she remembered her promise. She refused to give up. Finally, the day came. She graduated from medical school, her white coat crisp, her smile wide. Mom and Kechi and Ada sat proudly in the front row, clapping with tears in their eyes. Chioma bowed her head. She had done it. The little maid who once slept on a mat had risen to stand among doctors. But her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The white walls of the new hospital gleamed in the sunlight. Outside the entrance, a large sign read, Chioma Foundation Medical Center. The ribbon was tied across the doors, waiting to be cut. Guests filled the compound, neighbors, children, church members, and even people from faraway towns. Cameras flashed, voices rose in excitement. And at the center of it all stood Chioma, dressed in her doctor's coat, her stethoscope hanging proudly around her neck. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they found Mom and Kechi and Ada. Both were smiling, tears glistening in their eyes. The master of ceremonies announced, "Today, we celebrate a daughter who rose from hardship to greatness. A child who once had nothing, but now gives back to many. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chioma." Applause thundered. Chioma stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she took the scissors. But before she cut the ribbon, she lifted the microphone. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of her journey. "I was once a little girl who had no bed to sleep on. I fetched water before dawn, I ate leftover food, I was punished for being late to school. Many thought I would never become anything. But here I am today, by the grace of God and by the kindness of a family that chose to love me." The crowd grew quiet. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. She continued, "This hospital is not just mine. It belongs to every child who was told they were not enough. It belongs to every girl who works as a maid when she should be in school. And it belongs to every parent who dreams of a better future for their children." She cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Inside, the hospital was well equipped. Clean wards, bright rooms, shelves stocked with medicine. But Chioma's vision went beyond treating the sick. Soon, she launched her charity organization, the Little Hands Project. Every weekend, young girls who worked as housemaids came to her center. They were given food, new clothes, and lessons. Chioma knelt among them, her eyes soft. She told them stories of her past, showing them that their suffering did not define their future. One girl, no older than 7, tugged at her hand one afternoon and asked, "Auntie, will I ever go to school?" Chioma smiled, her heart swelling with compassion. "Yes, my dear. You will go to school. And one day, you will be anything you want, maybe even a doctor like me." The little girl's eyes lit up with hope, the same hope Chioma once carried quietly in her heart. Years later, people would remember her not only as a doctor, but as a woman who turned her pain into a blessing for others. Her life had come full circle. From a child who fetched water at 4 a.m. to a woman who built a fountain of hope for the less privileged. And every time she stood before the children in her care, she would whisper the words that had carried her through. "One day will surely come. Never stop believing."